YouTube, it's me, Birdie, and today I'm here to give you guys all the books that I read in January. Now, unfortunately, I only read 5 books, which is half of what I read in January of 2018. For some reason, I don't know if it was just a reading slump or what, I just did not read as much as I usually do, or again, as much as I did in January of last year. But that being said, I did read 2,635 pages, which puts me on track for reading 30,000 pages in 2019. I have to at least read 2,500 and I surpassed that. So that was good at least. For specific stats on the books that I read this month, 3 I personally owned, 2 I borrowed from my library. None of them were rereads, but 2 of them were the last books in a series, or the last book that is out, which is good, so I have 2 series down. I read books written by 3 male authors and 2 female authors, so that's pretty good. It was pretty split. I read 2 self-help nonfiction books, 2 fantasies, and 1 science fiction suspense novel. As for the reading level, I read 4 adult books, which is great, and then 1 middle grade. I read 3 books from the 2000s and 2 books from the 2010s, so not as good as I would have liked, but I know for a fact that in February I will have finished 2 books that are pre-1800s, I think, or at least in the older publication date ranges. And as for ratings, I gave 2 5 stars and 3 3 stars, so I was either really pleased with the books I read or just like meh. There was no in between, and thankfully no books that I absolutely hated. So going into the specific books I read. The first book I finished this year was a 5-star read, or I gave an A rating, and that was Secret Machines: A Fire Within by Tom DeLonge and A.J. Hartley. So I read the first book in this series, Chasing Shadows, in 2018, and that was literally my favorite book of that year. So I knew I definitely wanted to get to the second book as soon as possible. This series is a multi-perspective suspense novel set mostly in the present, although there are some perspectives that are from the past. Really, there are 4 main perspectives, and in the first book we don't know how they connect, but they all have weird phenomena coming or occurring during these perspectives, and the characters are trying to figure out what these phenomena are. These phenomena do have like hints of science fiction, but just enough to make you be like, oh, that's a little weird, not enough to be like, oh, that couldn't possibly happen. It is mostly rooted in reality, with the science fiction elements being suspenseful or adding suspense to the story, and it really makes you gripped into the story. I know this is a very vague summary of the first book in the series as a whole, but you really need to go in not knowing much, because the whole gripping aspect is not knowing what exactly is going on and if it's something out of this world or something more realistic. In the second book, there's expectedly a bit more science fiction because of what happens in the end of the first book, but again, it's not overpowering or distracts from the reality of the novel. And for me, A Fire Within was just as gripping and suspenseful as the first book, if not more, which was just amazing. And I know I've said this when talking about Chasing Shadows, but this series definitely has Dan Brown, his Robert Langdon series vibes to it, and I just love that so much. Somehow the stakes are raised in this book, and the main characters really rise to the occasion, which is really interesting because of how they were characterized in the first book. So just the growth and development from that first book to the second is just amazing, and I love it so much. And honestly, I just love the sequel, and again, I gave it an A. I can't wait to see if there's other books in the series, because even though there is kind of a cliffhanger at the end, it was tied up nicely enough that this could be the last book in this series, making it just a duology, but at the same time there's enough to go on to make more books in the series, and I really hope they do, because I'm fascinated to see where Tom DeLonge and AJ Hartley go with this series and the characters and the plot. And I hope there's more books in the series, but if not, at the very least, I'm going to be checking out all of Tom DeLonge's related books. So I have that to look forward to. And I definitely do recommend this series. It's just amazing. And it's a great starting point for people who want to get into science fiction, I believe, because it's not extremely unrealistic or science fiction-y. For the most part, it is rooted in reality. It just has little hints and murmurs of science fiction in the background that kind of make it more interesting. So yeah, I definitely think this is a great place to start if you are wanting to get into adult science fiction. Now, the second book I read, I borrowed from the library, and that was How to Think Like Einstein: Simple Ways to Break the Rules and Discover Your Hidden Genius by Scott Thorpe. As you would expect from this title, this book is all about helping the reader open their mind to different problem-solving techniques. And while it was interesting to read about the different suggestions on how to effectively think outside of the box, a lot of the advice given was really repetitive. Honestly, this book could have been cut in half or even into a quarter of its size easily without losing a lot of the suggestions or techniques given in it, because it was really just redundantly restated over and over again, different suggestions or methods. Additionally, it was very hard to picture a lot of the examples for certain suggestions and how to open your mind or to solve problems. And honestly, I think it's because he did give a lot of more work-related examples rather than putting these advice tips into more like personal issues related. I don't know if I'm explaining that right, but there was a lot of corporate metaphors rather than metaphors that could be more easily enforced or taken into more personal or individual life issues. And so it was hard to kind of wrap my head around some of the suggestions given, especially the last section of the book. It was mostly focused on solving corporate problems rather than personal or individualized issues. And because of that, it was hard to see how they could be transferred from corporate issues to more personal issues. And for this reason, I gave this only a C-. I think, again, it was interesting. It just was not very helpful or useful, in my opinion. The third book I read was Assassin's Quest by Robin Hobb. This is the third book in her Farseer trilogy, which is the recommended starting point when reading her Realm of the Elderling series. I won't go into much detail about this book because, one, it is the third book in the trilogy, and two, I plan on giving a whole series review for the Farseer trilogy. But I will say that I thought this was a great conclusion to a very enjoyable series. Even though this series had a lot of build-up and therefore was more slow-paced, this one definitely was where things picked up because a lot of the conflicts were coming to heads, and it was a bit more fast-paced. I will not say it was very fast, but it was in comparison to the first two books in the series. And I will say that this pacing is important in order to get all of the characters and their relationships properly fleshed out and to get all of the different conflicts, because throughout the series it's not just focusing on one conflict at one point of time. Really, the magic of this series is how she interweaves the different conflicts at different points and makes one important at one point but still having the other conflicts underlying that one. It's just completely well done in how it is interwoven. And at the same time, she was able to build on the setting of her story because we are seeing kind of more of this world than we have in the first two books, or at the very least we're seeing a different section than we have seen in the previous books. Now, despite the fact that there were a lot of conflicts going on, the end of the book ended very neatly, but in a way that, one, was very natural and fitting and did not seem like forced, and two, still allowed there to be some open-endedness where we'll learn about them most likely more in the other series within this realm of the Elderlings overarching series. I love this book so much, and I gave it therefore an A, and I honestly can't wait to read more of Robin Hobb's books. So, looking forward to that. The fourth book that I read was The Stormrunner by J.C. Cervantes. I don't have the cover with me, or the dust jacket with me, so I will put a picture up, but I do have the physical book with me. So unfortunately I was disappointed with another Rick Riordan's Presents book. This is the second I read, the first being Arusha, and in both cases I felt that they were trying to be Percy Jackson in a way that felt kind of forced. And I will say that I know that a lot of the mythologies of the world are very similar or mirror each other, and therefore I should expect there to be some resemblance to the Greek mythology represented in the Percy Jackson series, but in both cases of Arusha and this book, The Stormrunner, I just felt like they could have chosen different mythologies than those represented, especially in the Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan. So in this book, we are following Mayan mythology, and I will say learning about Mayan mythology, which is something that I haven't really studied much, was the most interesting part of this book. Every other aspect fell flat. For one, I thought that the story started in a weird place, which therefore spiraled into me not liking the characters because I did not feel a connection to them at all, and then not liking the pacing of the story. I feel like the first 50 pages were the height of the conflict, and then the next 200 pages or so, I just felt like nothing happened, and then again it picked up a little bit at the last 50 pages. So I just thought the entire pacing on where the story started and how the plot continued on was just a bit awkward. I really don't have much more to say, and I do plan on making a whole Rick Riordan's Presents video, or separately dedicated video, once I read more of them, but as of now, I did not enjoy this book, sadly, and therefore gave it a C. I will continue on to see if the second book gets better, and if it was just that this book kind of fell into the framework of the Rick Riordan books, and hopefully it'll just get better in the second one. But I gave this one a C, and I did not, sadly, enjoy it as much as I wanted to, which is even worse because I did meet the author for all of the Rick Riordan Presents books that have been released as of yet and are going to be releasing this year. No, that's a lie, because we didn't see Rebecca Roanhorse. But anyway, I met all of them, and they were so nice. I'm so sad that I did not like the two books that I read so far from this. I have Dragon Pearl, which is the third published one in the Rick Riordan's Presents, and I'm hoping that that will break the trend that is going on with these books, but sadly did not enjoy this book as much as I wanted to. And the final book that I read this month was Stumbling on Happiness by Daniel Gilbert. This was not what I was expecting it to be. I thought this would be kind of a self-help book about how to find happiness, or how happiness kind of just cannot be forced, and therefore just like you stumble upon happiness. But no, this book is more about different psychologies that don't even have to really do with happiness, or I didn't see how they connect to happiness. For the most part, this focused on things like perception and rationality, or rationalization. And while the psychologies of these aspects are interesting, I, again, did not see how they tied back to happiness, and I feel like this book could have done so much better, or I would have enjoyed it so much more if the last chapter in this book was a chapter on how these different psychologies tied back to happiness. But I did not get that, and for that reason, I did not enjoy it that much, and therefore gave it a C-. So, I did have 2 books that I enjoyed a lot, and I was really expecting to enjoy them. The other 3, I did not like as much, sadly, in the case of The Storm Runner by J.C. Cervantes. The other 2 kind of more self-help books, I really shouldn't have expected to enjoy them as much because I don't find that I just enjoy them as much as like other nonfiction pieces or fantasy, of course. But I feel a little sad that because I did not read as much, the fact that most of these books I did not love just makes me sad. So I'm hoping that the next month will be better. I already, at this point of filming, I have finished 2 books that I did start at the end of January, but I obviously did not finish until February. So I am looking forward to talking to you guys about those books and to whatever books I finish in February. As I said, I'm hoping to film a whole separate review on the Farseer trilogy itself by Robin Hobb, and I think I might do the same thing for the The Secret Machine series by Tom DeLonge and AJ Hartley, but that I haven't planned out yet, so I'm not sure if I will do that. Maybe I will, because I feel like that's a series that, 1, again, will be a great place to start in the science fiction genre, and 2, I just really enjoyed it, and therefore, because there's not a lot of people talking about it, I do want to talk about it and give it praise. But yeah, I'm rambling, so I'm going to end this video now. Have you guys read any of the books I talked about? What were the books that you guys read in January? I'd love some more recommendations, although from this little stack that I have next to my bed and the books I have written down as books that I plan on reading for the next couple of months, I have a lot, and I have no idea how I'm going to get to all of the ones that I want to get to in the next couple of months. So, even though I would love more recommendations, I do not see how I'll get to them anytime soon, but I would still love recommendations, because, I mean, I just don't mind adding books to this list. But, yeah, so that's everything that I read in January, and I'll talk to you guys in my next video. Bye.